so sweet as Jesus. No one ever cared so much for me as to shed his precious blood to save me. No one ever cared so much for me. When I'll see him face to face, up in glory, I will marvel at his nail-scarred feet. Nail-scarred feet. And I'll thank him for the pain he suffered, because he cared so much for me. There's no one cares, no one cares like Jesus. There's no friend so precious to me, who will carry your cross to Calvary. No one ever cared so much for me. There's no one cares like Jesus. There's no friend so precious to me, who will carry your cross to Calvary. No one ever cared so much for me. No one ever cared so much for me. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of his Spirit, washed in his blood.
Perfect submission, perfect delight, visions of rapture now burst on my sight. Angels descending bring from above echoes of mercy, whispers of love.
This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, all is at rest. I in my Savior watching and waiting, looking above, filled with his goodness, lost in his love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. his land untouched by men, prepared for the saved and the blessed. A city built for swear, far away somewhere, as a home for the saints to rest. So many have tried, but they couldn't describe all the beauties on that bright shore. For it's never entered into the hearts of men what the Father has in store. I could sing about heaven for 1,000,000 years and never get a story told of the jasper walls and the gates of pearls and the streets made of pure gold. Even John the Revelator in the heavenly vision could never really say what he saw. I could sing about heaven for 1,000,000 years and still I could never tell it all.
From the throne there springs a glimmering stream of waters pure and sweet,
And it flows by the tree of life on its way to the crystal sea.
and the precious stones that the walls rest on are of 12 different kinds.
Oh, and the night will cease, for the Prince of Peace is the light that forever shines. I could sing about heaven for 1,000,000 years and never get a story told of the jasper walls and the gates of pearl and the streets made of pure gold. Even John the Revelator in the heavenly vision could never really say what he saw. I could sing about heaven for 1,000,000 years and still I could never tell it all. I could sing about heaven for 1,000,000 years and never get a story told of the jasper walls and the gates of pearl and the streets made of pure gold. Even John the Revelator in the heavenly vision could never really say what he saw. I could sing about heaven for 1,000,000 years and still I could never tell it all. Even John the Revelator in the heavenly vision could never really say what he saw. I could sing about heaven for 1,000,000 years and still I could never tell it all.
By nightfall,
Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of his Spirit, washed in his blood.
Perfect submission, perfect delight, visions of rapture now burst on my sight. Angels descending, bring from above echoes of mercy, whispers of love.
This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, all is at rest. I in my Savior am happy and blessed, watching and waiting, looking above, filled with his goodness, lost in his love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
It is an indeed honor of mine, a great honor, to be a part of this service today for Mr. Mike Baxley, who I will refer to from this point on as Mr. Baxley as I knew him. And I just can't express enough my honor that I have of being able to be a part of this service today. Would you bow your heads with me as we open up this service in prayer? Father, today we are thankful, Lord, for the love and the mercy of God. Lord, today we're here to honor Mr. Baxley's life, Lord. Truly, this man was a gift to this family, to his students, to all of those that knew him, that were a part of his life. God, today I pray that in the course of this service, your name would be honored, God, and that, Lord, we would honor this life today, that, Lord, had such an impact and such an influence on so many lives. God, the number of them, Lord, can never be counted. But God, I do know one thing today. You know every single one of them. And Lord, we just give you the praise today and the glory and the honor for Mr. Baxley's life, his legacy. And Lord, let the comfort of your Spirit and the love of Jesus Christ surround this family today. And we give you all the praise for it now in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. I first met Mr. Baxley in August of 1976, my 9th grade year of Pace High School. I'd already had a Mr. Purvis Baxley, who was my principal at King's Middle School. I was always, Mr. Purvis Baxley was a legend, kind of, at King's Middle School. And I don't know why they told me this, but my first year there, they said, now, Mike, I'm going to tell you, if you get in trouble, you know, Mr. Foster would be good, but don't go to Mr. Baxley. Just, you know, don't stay away from Mr. Purvis Baxley's office. I don't know why they told me that, but anyway, I did end up getting into Mr. Foster's office. And back in those days, they took the paddle, and, you know, you leaned over a chair and splat. So I did visit that office, but I said after I left there after the 7th grade year and our family moved to Pace, I was thankful, yes, thank you, God, I did not go to Mr. Purvis Baxley's office. So I'm thinking at that time, all the Baxleys are behind me, never realizing that one would yet be before me, and he would be the most interesting one, to say the least. I entered that classroom for the first time, history. I'm thinking, history, kind of like at that age, kind of like one of those boring subjects, that kind of thing. But oh no, history class would be much more than anything but boring with Mr. Baxley there. And he was our history teacher. It was during that first week that he began to give us names. we were no longer, my name was no longer Mike, my last name was no longer Poston. I mean, from day one, our names were gone, basically. And he gave us all a name. And mine was better than some of them, but yet still, he gave me the name of Post Toasty. And that was the name I would always be known by Mr. Baxley. Never Mike, never Post. Post Toasty was the name. And, he named all of us. Yeah, and I knew at that particular moment, this is going to be a very interesting year, this ninth grade year. In the first several weeks there, we were able to hear Mr. Baxley's quotes that he had. And one of my favorite, and you have them inside of your memorial folders here, but one of my first one is, and probably the one that he said more than any of them, was now he'd be up there teaching a lesson or going over things, and he would say, now I may be wrong, pause, but I kind of doubt it. And it got to where we memorized these things over the years. He's like, now I may, and he'd go, and, as we went on in the year, he'd say, now I may be wrong. And the class would say, and I kind of doubt it, that kind of thing. And we would just follow along with him and everything. This picture right here is from Pace High School. I know that. That's that. And from that platform right there, those eyes could go this way, those eyes could go that way, and looking straight that way. I don't know how he did it, but he did. And he kept his eye on all of us, rightfully so. We had a relationship that was different than others, but I am thankful that we had it. There was one time that he was working on a math problem, and with several of the students there around his desk, I come walking into the room, and I just hollered out a number, 147. I said, Post Toasty, sit down. You don't know what you're talking about, and furthermore, you don't know anything about this math problem. I said, yes, sir. So he spends a few minutes there, and they're around their desk. He says, 142. And I said, well, I was close, wasn't I? And he kind of looked at me like with those eyes that could kind of just go through you. While we were in his class, I could go on for a lot of different things, but he also had a history club that was a part of Pace High School in those years. The history club was the most popular club of all of Pace High School. The only way that they would really accept people into the club was when someone graduated out of the club. There was a waiting list. And every picture of the history club was always filled with, people, the students that were there, and Mr. Baxley right there in the middle of it all. And it was a very popular club of that day. And everybody wanted to go on the trips, and everybody wanted to be with Mr. Baxley because he had the #1 club in all of Pace High School in those days. While I was in his class, I knew that he not only wanted to teach us, but he wanted us to get what he taught. He had, I fully believe, the gift of teaching, being able to teach a young man, a young woman, the lessons that he had placed before him. And he certainly had that gift. When we let our class members know, our class folks that we graduated in our class, the class of 1980 out of Pace High School, or know about his passing, there's many comments that were shared, and I want to share some of those with you this morning. He was my favorite teacher, was said many times. He was a great teacher, again, many times that was said. We loved being in his class, the coolest teacher ever. He set me on the path to where I am today. He was truly a legend. Now, he would tell you he was a legend, but this is a different legend. There's two legends that you got to understand about Mr. Baxley. There's his legend and our legend. He had that sense of humor, and boy, did he ever. He will be missed by many, and yes, he will. A major influence in my life. He cared so much for his students and was always there with advice when needed. You will never know how much you meant to me. He made learning fun. He was one of a kind, and he helped shape many lives. So true. An inspiration to us all. and that is for sure. What made Pace High School for me, and I shared this with this family already, what made Pace High School for me was Mr. Baxley. I can't think of Pace High School without thinking about Mr. Baxley. It's just impossible. You know, it's kind of like salt and pepper. They just go together. I mean, every time I think about that school and I think about our years there as a class, Mr. Baxley as teacher, and we had many teachers there over those 4 years, but Mr. Baxley's name just somehow rises to the top as something that was an experience for all of us that were there and that were part of that class. And he was so much a part of our time there, and he will always be remembered first and foremost as our teacher. The morning that the family contacted me about this service, there was something that I was already thinking about. It's funny how the Lord works this out, because family, I can tell you the Lord was already dealing with me about this service, always speaking to my heart about this service when this family called me and we spoke over the phone. And I thought, you know, this idea kind of came to me, and I wanted to share this with you this morning. That's the sound where we would all say, class dismissed. Well, I want to say this in closing today. Mr. Baxley's class is dismissed. And we, his students, will take it from here. But he will always be and always remain in our hearts. Family, may God bless you today is our prayer. And let me share one more scripture with you before I close my part of this service. And it's found in the book of Philippians, chapter 1, verse number 3. And it simply says these words, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you. God bless you today. And God bless the memory and the legacy of my teacher, Mr. Baxley.
Before I read his obituary and a couple of the things that I've been asked to share with you all today, I wanted to tell you a little bit of context about who this old gal is up here and where all this is coming from. It's my hope that knowing something about me will give you a better frame of reference for the depth of Mr. B, we called him Mr. B at Central, for the depth of his impact. The time when I met Mr. B, it was a new and daunting chapter for me personally. My parents had split up about a year earlier. My mom, sisters, and I, we had moved in with my grandparents out in Allentown. And I started at a new school, which was Central. Of course, teenage years, they're pretty challenging anyway. And so I sort of felt at this time like a small ship in a lot of big waves. And it was really a sinking time in some ways for all those changes. But around this time, Mr. Baxley officially stepped on the scene. And if you know Mr. B, you know that he made quite the entrance. He was a bit of a hulking figure of a man, and he was probably never referred to a day in his life as either timid or quiet. He had a big personality and a reputation that preceded him, and it caused a stir, actually. Some students were fearful of taking him. There were a lot of whispers around that had kind of trickled down to underclassmen, I guess, and they felt like this is, intimidating, and they were petrified in some cases, and that's even the boys. When you got in his class, though, you realized how all those preconceptions came about. Besides his imposing stature that might have caused a little bit of concern, he also let students know how he felt. He was a real straight shooter. On top of these qualities that may have made him intimidating to some, most of us can appreciate that high school kids have raging hormones, and they can even be kind of bratty at times. No offense to the teenagers in the room. But processing now through the thoughts of him in that high school world, I really don't envy some of the encounters he had with my cohort or perhaps other crops of students. He was a brave man, though, for teaching high school, and undoubtedly relied on some of that military training and war experience to get through certain days. Usually the most you saw from him, though, was this humorous, grumbly sort of sass. When a couple things happened, when students and Mr. Baxley would banter back and forth about the virtues of the Duke, John Wayne, or when students would hide his very prized, beloved John Wayne picture that hung next to a picture of his heart. And he said that he kept that picture of his heart on his wall to prove that he indeed did have a heart for any doubtful students. But his grumbles and seeming gruffness, they were surface level, as many of you who know him realize. And for me personally, he took on a father figure type role in my life after my parents split. And he did that job really well, complete with this unending, continuous replay loop of expressions of Mr. B and his cornball humor. At the end of the day, we all came to learn that Mr. B was really just a big old softy. Myself, I was a pretty good student, usually. I had some situations of my own that I wouldn't care to go on the record for publicly, where Mr. B could have been a lot less merciful with me and others who I knew. So I was subjected a couple times to his favorite disciplinary practice of having you put one hand 3 inches above the other and slapping it. But whether he was grumbly or in his more normal jovial state of mind, he was all ours, and we were all his individually and collectively. And what I mean by that is he treated us all uniquely and with his own Mr. B flair. As you had a nickname, I did as well, and to him, I was Katie. And this was a nickname he gave me from a really sweet World War I song. It's so precious. And I've been listening to it all week on YouTube, and I've been grasping for the opportunity to hear Katie one more time. But of course, it's not the same, on YouTube as it is coming from him. Another specific memory for me in particular was him finding great fun in leading the whole class in a daily Katie sneeze countdown after he started noticing that I emitted a solid 3 sneezes each day. It was really embarrassing at first that everyone's focus was centered on my sneezes, since they sound a little odd to begin with, but I soon got on the bandwagon, and I treated those sneeze countdowns like the ritual pledge during our first period class. I would even help him out if he forgot what number sneeze we were on a particular day. But there were other things that he did that made me and classmates feel truly special. One of those was the way he gave feedback. Although I'm sure he'd seen better quality and better quality work regularly, he always made me feel like my class papers were the best thing since the Duke when he'd review them and give feedback. And he made history come alive in class with his wit and his stories and his slides and videos he'd show and music. And now I'm kind of a nerd, but I read my history books in high school cover to cover because of this man. There are several places I've seen, and I still plan on seeing, that we studied in those history books or discussed in class, or he and I one-on-one. He continues to touch my life in so many ways. He was there, though, not just as a teacher, but as a mentor and a friend and a counselor. He was inspirational about future success, too. He encouraged me to apply for scholarships. He even went with me to accept one. And I personally went on to major in history as my first college degree because he made history so awesome for me through his classes. I don't think he ever knew that he propelled me in that direction, and if he knew, he would have just shrugged and muttered his usual, "Aw, shucks." And that's the response he had to anything that was remotely complimentary. Overall, I went from a feeling like I might be sinking when I began high school to later, riding the waves and having a firm foothold in high school and beyond because of what this man did for me. He was witty, he was encouraging, and he was inspirational. He was one of the greatest men I ever knew. And I've been asked to read a Facebook post that I shared earlier this week that conveys a little bit more about Mr. Baxley. Mr. Baxley, I hope you realize the profound and lasting impact you had on the education, careers, and lives of myself and so many others. When I think of you, it renews my focus on caring for those I serve, loving what I do, and maintaining humor and a down-to-earth approach even when things may be stressful or not go the way I think. I don't know if you ever really got to look at the dedication acknowledgement section of my dissertation a few years back, but I'm attaching it here because I want others to know that you weren't just a legend in your own mind, as you so often joked. You're a real-life legend. You are a Vietnam veteran and an inspirational educator. Thank you for going with me to the SRPE Awards, for the Red Lobster Lunch, and for all your understanding and belief in me when I wasn't so sure of myself in high school, college, and well beyond. With you and your John Wayne spirit in my corner, how could I not stand taller, feel more determined, and take on more challenges? I'll greatly miss the man and will never forget the legend. Love you, Mr. B, Katie. Now, I mentioned in my post about attaching my dissertation, which is basically a book that's meant to be a sleep aid or a doorstop. Writing it's the final step to completing your doctoral degree, and I don't normally feel too comfortable talking about the extent of my degrees and school background in conversations because it feels maybe weird or braggartish on some level. But I'll just say this, it's the case that I have more degrees than Mr. B could count on his four-toed foot. And through those pursuits and my career in higher education, I have to tell you that I've experienced dozens and dozens of fine quality educators. While there are some exceptional individuals in that mix, it's no small testament to how great I think he is that Mr. B was only one of only two teachers that I recognized in my dissertation. Now, I tried to share the book's acknowledgement section with him when the dissertation was published a few years back. To my lifelong regret, though, I attached the whole PDF of the entire document rather than a screenshot of only the acknowledgement section, as I did in the post. Attaching the PDF in hindsight makes sifting through the document a pretty mammoth task for anybody who's looking for the dissertation, the dedication section specifically. I asked him not to bother with the tedium of the paper, but read that recognition section if he could. I'm not sure, though, if he ever did, because all he said in response was how very, very proud he was of me. And that was all that ever seemed to matter to him. He never neglected to tell me how proud he was of me. And he did this in high school. He did it in college. He did it in my professional life. He did it through messages, through phone conversations, and when I saw him in person. I hope he knows that if he is proud of me in any measure, I am who I am in any positive sense because of what he invested in me. So in case you didn't read this dedication while you were here with us, Mr. B, I want you to hear it now. While I've been fortunate enough and have been in education circuits long enough to have experienced the guidance of some outstanding instructors, I would be remiss if I did not express my most heartfelt appreciation to Mr. Michael Baxley for instilling in me a love of history. Tracing figures back through American history in this manuscript was exciting because of the enthusiasm you fueled in me for the subject of history. I will remain forever grateful that you chose to become a teacher, that you burst far beyond the bounds of obligation, and that you believe so much in the potential of this once awkward teenager. Thank you for your lessons, your support, and your guidance. While oft underappreciated, educators perform a great and lasting service. In addition to contributions and competencies that will serve me throughout my life, you have taught me to appreciate personal and professional responsibility, to set a high bar for success, and commit to goals. Thank you for the invaluable gifts you've given me through your selfless service. Finally today, I'm humbled by the honor of having been asked to read his clever, beautiful, funny, heartwarming, and very Mr. B obituary. He was certainly an original that touched and helped mold so very many student lives. He sacrificed and he gave a whole heck of a lot to be there for us. But as much as we students loved him and he loved us, his true loves and delights were his daughters and his grandchildren and his family. They made him beam with joy and love and pride. And I know it is all of our hope here today that they'll find comfort and peace through these words in the obituary, knowing that this wonderful legacy will live on in them and so many others. Mike Baxley reached heavenly tenure on May 5, 2019. Before passing, Mike blazed a 72-year-old trail of laughter, generosity, compassion, and corny jokes. Mike has now been reunited with his parents, Purvis and Betty Baxley. He leaves behind a large and loving family, one that he spent a lifetime researching as the family genealogist. Despite his tremendous love for his children and siblings, these people were mere mortals and couldn't hold a candle to his beloved grandchildren, Annalise, Annie Hirschman, and Michael Mickey Hines, Mike's best friend and favorite football player of all time. Mike proudly served his country during 2 tours in Vietnam. He returned stateside with 9 toes and a desire to become a teacher. And he earned his bachelor's and master's degree from Livingston University. Mike was a barbershop singer performing in shows all over the Southeast with the Society for Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Quartet Singing in America, a barbershop society. And by now, he has most certainly convinced the Angels to join him in a few songs from Hello, Dolly. Mr. B taught and inspired countless students during his 35 years for Santa Rosa County Schools. He employed any method he thought necessary to engage students to learn, even if it meant he had to perform a front flip over his desk in class. Mike proudly displayed his portrait of John Wayne in his classroom, I can attest, and it was absent only when occasionally pilfered by disgruntled students. Always a fashionista, Mr. B could be seen sporting plaid pants and a snazzy pocket protector throughout the hallways in the 70s, and also the 80s, and probably the 90s if the pants were still fitting him. Special thanks go to his many students that had to endure his teachings at Pace High, King Middle, and Central High. You are all cherished in the classroom and for decades after. Once a student, always family. A lifelong University of Florida fan who bled orange and blue, Mike had requested Urban Meyer and the 2010 coaching staff as pallbearers so that his beloved Gators could let him down one more time. With Mr. Meyer unavailable, though, pallbearers are Dan Hines, Annalise Hirschman, Mickey Hines, Kyle Baxley, Jonathan Kirkland, and Tay Norman. Honorary pallbearers are the B.T. Washington High School varsity football team. In lieu of flowers, Mr. B and Dad would be honored for you to donate to his love of football by supporting the local quarterback clubs at either Milton High or B.T. Washington High School. Mr. B's students always said that he was a legend in his own mind, and now he remains one forever in our hearts.
Beautiful sounds of the world in a single word. Maria, 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 Maria. I've just met a girl named Maria, and suddenly that name will never be the same to me. Maria, I've just kissed a girl named Maria, and suddenly I've found how wonderful a sound can be. Maria, say it loud and there's music playing. Say it soft and it's almost like praying. Maria, I'll never stop saying Maria, 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 and it's almost like praying. Maria. I'll never stop saying Maria. The most beautiful song I ever heard. Maria.
Let's hope I don't fall off the stage. A legend in his own mind. That's what he would always say. But now that legend will live on in our hearts because of all he impacted along the way. He was the firstborn of the family, a fact he would never let anyone forget. But he blazed the trail for the rest of us to follow in his own unique way of showing us his heart. That heart carried him as a young and proud Panther, a scrawny kid that never saw any play. But with true grit and determination, he became a standout who never left the game. In '64, he proudly earned his black tassel, and his heart led him to serve this land he loved. He anchored away to begin his training as he joined the can't talk this morning, the Spare Belly Button Club. For those who are not privileged enough to know Mike's sense of humor, a spare belly button is also known as the Naval Reserves. Then his heart would be tested in combat, where he proved he was truly a man, as he deployed not once but for 2 tours in that war zone of South Vietnam. There he served with honor and distinction, boldly going where many refused to go. And he returned with such a pride in his Navy, and also with 9 of his toes. Next, his heart found its true calling at a place he would always call Livingston. Yes, I made the mistake of calling it Western Alabama one time in that lecture I thought would never end. There he perfected his passion for teaching, and his journey of sharing, it truly began. He returned home with room in his heart for 2 more, as he was gifted with his 2 he adored. And it's a testament to how he raised them as they stood by him when he needed them most. The next 35 years was of giving his heart out to the students he loved, whether that meant standing up to some administrations, countless field trips, or even a combat role. But a heart can become weak with so much giving, and at times his was strained and attacked. But he persevered with many would have gave up because he wanted no kids to lack. His perseverance, his perseverance was worth it because for his heart would soon swell with more love as he welcomed his little darling Annie and then Mickey, his best bud in the world. But finally, his old heart was worn out. It was time for his suffering to come to an end. So the Lord gave him rest up with his parents. And then one day we too can see him again. But I wish I could have seen that grand entrance as he called out to St. Peter and the like. As he introduced himself and waved proudly, "It's me, your favorite Christian, named Mike." It's an honor to have the opportunity to stand up here this morning and talk about my Uncle Mike. It's a testament to a man that you can stand up and talk about his life And you don't have to sugarcoat it. You don't have to try to polish it. Mike was a great man. Mike was a flawed man. For most of my life, especially as a young man, I never quite got my Uncle Mike. I really never knew where I stood with him. I learned pretty quick. It wasn't in front of the TV when the news was playing. But Mike wasn't the fun younger uncles that I had. Mike wasn't the carefree uncles that I had to do all that. Mike was more serious. Mike was always busy. But when I really learned to appreciate Mike is when I started becoming a teacher myself. I'll never forget my first year at Milton High School as a teacher. And all these kids are people, some of them adults, some parents of the students would come up and say, "Hey, wait, are you a Baxley?" And I would always caveat, I said, "Well, what, are you talking about a Purvis or are you talking about a Mike?" I said, because there's a difference there, and I wouldn't always claim Mike to start with. But it started real simple when he says, "No, you don't understand." He says, "I am who I am today because of the teacher that Mr. Baxley was." He says, "I am the person that I became because of the passion that he had." The older I got, the more I began to appreciate the man of Mike Baxley. The more I began to appreciate his unique style and the way he truly loved. At times, it was simply a phone call that started the same way. Chris, hey, this is your favorite Uncle Mike, the great one, you know, right? Always. But I began to cherish those phone calls. I began to cherish the time, and I began to see the way he truly threw his heart out to so many people. Whether it just by love, whether it by time, whether it be some people with money, anything that he could do to give of himself, he truly gave. One of the things I've learned in life is that you can tell a lot by a person by how they are as a grandparent. I honestly believe that. And if that's the case, there's no greater testament to the man of Mike Baxley than the love he shared for all his grandkids. You may not know this, but when Annie was 1, she was already writing papers. She was going to be a valedictorian someplace because she was obviously the smartest in her class. At 5 years old, she was ready to drive. He was surprised she was not already getting invitations to college. That's just how it was. I would get phone calls, and he's like, "You just don't understand. You really just don't understand." And then came his Mickey. Didn't know it was possible to be born at 6'5". I didn't know you could become a quarterback at 3 years old when you had just started toddling around, but that was it. I was very fortunate in life to have 2 of the best grandparents you could have, and my kids are very fortunate to have 2 that they could have. My grandpas were my heroes, but it's only a few cases where I've seen where the grandson became the hero to the grandpa. There was no way you could talk to Mr. Baxley. There was no way you could talk to Uncle Mike without knowing the love that he had for his grandkids and the amount of time he went to it. It wasn't until later when I found out that he had adopted any school they went to. See, he taught for 35 years for Santa Rosa County, but his teaching days weren't over. Because even though when they no longer gave him a paycheck, that he showed up at all of these schools and became the hero to those kids. He would sit down and he would read to them. He would retell the stories of history, and he would make education become alive. Because that passion, it never left him. It's tough when you see someone grow old, someone that you love, and somebody that you respect. And I saw that in my Uncle Mike. From a young age, I can vividly remember the first time I remember when he had his first heart attack. And I remember a conversation overhearing. I was too young to know everything that was going on, but I remember someone making the comment that he just cared too much, and the stress is what broke his heart. I watched him as he aged through his life and through the struggles that he had with his health. And I realized that was how thankful I was that this isn't it. This isn't all we have. My favorite passage, especially when I'm talking about someone in their future, comes from the book of Isaiah. In the book of Isaiah 41 and verse 2, He says, do you not know and have you not heard that the Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth? He gives strength to the weary. Because even the youth grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar with wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and they will not faint. The last few years have been hard on Mike. He suffered through a lot of pain. His heart failed him, disease failed him, and for the last few months he really suffered as he laid in bed. And so I am today thankful that his Lord came and gave him peace. I'm thankful that today he rests in glory with his parents again. And I also live in the hope of knowing that one day soon I will get to see him again. You see, because I believe that death is not final. The book of 1 Corinthians tells us that death no longer has a sting, that death no longer has a victory. There is a new song that's out, at least it's new for me to hearing, and it talks about that moment that there came the morning that sealed the promise when your buried body began to breathe. And out of the silence, the roaring lion declared, death has no claim on me. I'm so thankful that I worship a Lord who's not leaving me here on this earth to rot forever. I'm worshiping a Lord that when my heart does fail, when I grow old and when I grow weary, that I too will be raised up in renewness and have the chance to live with him and all of my family forever and ever. I'm thankful so much for my favorite uncle named Mike. The life he lived, the example that he showed, and the love he gave to all. And I can't wait one day to cross those pearly gates myself so he can tell me once again how great he really is.
Thank you all for being here. It's been so tremendous to have the outpouring of love and memories that have been shared with our family. I'm Michelle. I'm actually Maria Michelle Baxley Hines, and I've known Dad for 47 years. And he was a good guy. But we're very humbled and honored that you guys loved him as much as we did. We really knew him in our bubble, and we forgot just how big his bubble was, and we thank you all, everybody who's here, everybody who's reached out to us. You are his family, and we thank you so much for loving him. We called him Dad or Daddy-O. Some in faraway places called him Mikey Doogie. Uncle John, he's with us from Afghanistan. Mancho Moose, Old Slew, Mr. B, S.O.B., which Dad, no, I'm sorry, I know I'm in a church. He would get called S.O.B. He always thought that meant sweet old Baxley. He found out years later that's not exactly what his students were meaning to call him. Most everybody in his later years knew him as Mickey's grandpa, or Grandpa Mike, right? I'm so honored to have our boys here today from our football family at Washington. He loves you guys more than you'll ever know. You're going to play for him this year real hard. He said to tell you that. He said to tell the president of the quarterback club, the police are on standby. So I'm going to try to do this, y'all, so bear with me. I am a trainer by profession, and it's so much easier when the AV equipment works, so check. Thank you, Margaret Street. And it's usually easier to talk about content when you have no ties to it. This will be different, so I'll do the best I can. I hit the lottery when I was born. There is no doubt about it. My parents were students at the old Livingston University in Livingston, Alabama. Go Tigers. They graduated when I was first born and moved to Milton. Dad took his first history teaching position at Pace High School. I think he knew a guy that got him the job. Nepotism in Santa Rosa County. But boy, did he love Pace High School, and did he love those Patriots. And you class members from back in the day have warmed our hearts. I cannot say go Patriots, but it's in my heart. And thank you for loving him and inviting him to the reunions. And he loved you guys, that first crew of Pace. Thank you for that. So some of the first memories, we lived in the city when we first came to town, and in the city that's right up off of Laughlin Lake. And when I would wait as a little girl for Dad to come home from school so we could go over to Laughlin Lake and feed the duckies. I looked forward to it every single day. I would wait impatiently for him to come home, so he would go with a bag of bread. I know, PETA people, we can't feed bread to ducks now, but back then we didn't know that, sorry. That big, towering, rough-voiced man would turn into such a little mushy teddy bear. He played me Disney albums from the time I was born, and musicals. He was fabulous, and he loved his musicals and Disney music. He took me to every Disney movie that ever came out from the time I could go to the movies. He was a California boy at heart, and his West Coast family and his mother grew up near Anaheim, California, and he loved everything California except for their politics. And I'm sure you heard that for a time or two if you ever talked to him about politics, which I would not recommend. So his family basically grew up in Disneyland's backyard, and we got to go to the starter park over in Anaheim, Walt Disney's starter park. But Dad and I agreed that Walt Disney World is definitely where it's at. Fun fact, you can put the whole Disneyland park in the parking lot of Disney World. So fun fact. As I moved into high school, things got a little bit different. He was strict, but he was fair. His expectations were high, and boy, did he give me every tool I'd ever need to succeed. I think I was the first person in the county in the 6th grade to have an Apple IIc computer. So I could, of course, study 24/7. Sorry, Dad, I did not do that, but I sure love the Oregon Trail. And print shop. I wasted a lot of his expensive ink, and he would tell me that often. But Oregon Trail is history related, if that counts. He kept me amply supplied in shoes. I did have a shoe problem. Esprit clothes, Rob Lowe posters, tons of music, makeup, Aquanet, Aussie hair products. He would complain and moan as he spent lots of money on me growing up. I would come home from shopping trips at Gayfers with my Aunt Tracy and tell him how much I saved him because we got discounts. One of his favorite, again, this joke's on rotation, he would tell his friends, yeah, my credit card got stolen, but I'm not going to call and report it because the thief is actually charging less than Michelle does, so I'm coming out ahead. I know I made him sad when I moved to Tallahassee at 18. No, not because I moved out, but because I became a Seminole. Go Noles. He smiled through his tears, but he did never once own anything garnet and gold. He never would do that. At 19, I was diagnosed with stage 2 cancer, and it threw us all for a loop. My mom and dad did everything in their power to get me the care that I needed. One of the first times I ever saw my dad cry was first when my sister was born. I cried too, but for different reasons. But then again on the day in the doctor's office. You know, he was so big and powerful and protector, but that was one thing he could not fix. And it changed him to be helpless. It was very hard for him to cope. But he did, with humor. I was going through radiation, and instead of him going to the microwave to warm up his food, he would ask me to hold it. Yeah. Spent a lot of money in therapy. He did many times have to force Ensures down my throat when I wasn't able to eat for weeks, and he was tough. And that was probably he was a good man, and he kept me alive then, and he's going to keep me alive for a long time just with his memories. But then in 1997 and 2001, I basically wasn't needed anymore because I gave him Annie and Mickey, and so my job was done. And he was the best dang grandpa that I've ever seen. And I had two practically perfect grandfathers, Purvis Baxley and Plug Walther. I mean, I hit the lotto with them. But then I watched my dad become a grandfather. My kids were loved and spoiled and best friends with this big old teddy bear. And my heart fills with pride as I look back on all the functions Dad was a part of. He was our fifth family member. I hadn't planned on speaking today because, I just didn't know if I could. But when I got on Facebook a few days after Sunday, I was instantly overwhelmed with the love of this community that you had for my daddy. And I wanted to honor his legacy, and we like to do that with humor. And I hope everyone understands that the laughter is okay in this room today. I'm so proud to be his daughter, and I am so lucky that Annie and Mickey have been given such a great legacy to try to live up to. I'd like to thank Post Toasty and Katie and my cousin Chris for their kind words in honoring Dad today. He would have loved it. Thank you so much. He wasn't just a teacher. He is what all teachers should strive to be and more. Not only did he expect you to learn, I think this has been a pretty good message today, he genuinely wanted you to learn, and he was able to balance his playful ego and spirit and allow his students to go back and forth and banter with him as they were learning along the way. Kids actually look forward to going to, I think I messed up. This is actually, my bad, Steve, you're in California. I wanted to read some posts from some people that have touched Dad's life. My good friend Steve Callahan is in Northern California, and he wrote some words for Dad. He was a student at King Middle School, and they would go back and forth for years. So Steve's words are as follows. I'll tell you, he wasn't just a teacher. He was what all teachers should strive to be, and then more. Not only did he expect you to learn in his class, he genuinely wanted you to learn. He was able to balance his playful ego and spirit and allow his students to go back and forth, badgering with him while we continuously learned a subject that a lot of kids had no interest in. No other teacher did such a thing. Kids actually looked forward to going to class because they knew there was going to be some kind of badgering or one-liners that he was going to spew out and make us laugh. There was absolutely no one better at making a class fun and interesting. Oh, sure, he had a soft side too, like a lot of teachers. When a kid was down or having a tough time, not only could he recognize it, but he always knew just the right thing to say and do. However, he didn't just stop there at saying or doing the right things. He also had a gift that he would use to cheer up that student when they were having those tough times. He enjoyed and cared so much for his students that he continued to keep in touch with them throughout the years. I would say that I have been so fortunate and blessed to have such a man as a teacher and friend over the years. I will miss him, especially when Georgia beats Florida, and I can't rag him for it. I will never forget him, as he has forever stamped my spirit in his memories. God bless you, Mr. B. Steve Callahan, King Middle School, around 1986. He was a lifelong friend of myself and of my dad. Another message I'll share quickly is RIP TGO. You made me laugh. You made me mad. Your current events projects made me really think about the world and my place in it. You loved John Wayne, and you made the Vietnam War real. Rest easy, TGO. You did a great job, and your legacy is never ending. Just for you, I'll say it once, go Gators. By his former student from King Middle School, Dee Dee Mitchell. She is a school teacher now at Berry Hill Elementary and a lifelong friend of our family. I've got few more, bear with me. Let me tell y'all something about Mr. Michael Baxley. He may have been a legend in his own mind, but he was also an actual legend in his heart and mind, so many of his students that he touched over the years. He was the type of teacher whose reputation preceded him. He was big, he was loud, and he didn't take any crap from anyone. His first day in class, I was terrified, so terrified, in fact, that I wouldn't even walk into his classroom alone. But boy, did that change quickly. Turns out that beneath his gruff exterior, Mr. B was actually an old softy, and he quickly became one of my favorite teachers. By my senior year, I was actually leaving other classes just to go hang out in Mr. B's room. My teachers would say it was okay as long as he didn't mind, and of course he never did. I can still perfectly picture his messy old classroom. Straight down the main hall, second door on the right. He kept a portrait of John Wayne on the wall, and I've never seen him as angry as the day some students hid that photo of the Duke. Of course, the photo was eventually returned to its rightful place, right next to the picture of his heart, which he kept on display on the wall to prove to doubtful students that he did, in fact, have a heart. The corny dad jokes never stopped with this man, and I'm sure heaven is full of giggles now, thanks to him. As much as his family of students loved him and were loved by him, we all know that the true loves of his life were his daughters and especially his grandson. He glowed with pride and joy when speaking of them. I can only hope that they, as well as the rest of his loved ones, can find some solace in this difficult time. That was Laura Cantino, Central High School, 1999. One last one, I'll shut up and move along. This one was awesome because it was another example of why my dad was such a dang amazing soul and a born teacher. When he retired, he adopted Mickey's elementary school at M.B. Cook in Pensacola. He would go there for years. He'd speak to the classes when Mickey was in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. The teachers loved his contributions and probably the chance to go to the restroom. And the students adopted them as their grandpa. And he would have weekly lunches with those guys, talking about history, sports, and basically how great he was. He never quit teaching or eating lunch, 2 of the 3 joys of his life. The first being all those little sports dudes that came with the Mickey package. He was at every T-ball game, flag football, soccer, basketball, everything that we did, Dad was right there with us. So there's a post from one of Mickey's friends that grew up with Grandpa Mike, and he shared this, and he's a teenager, so, I was it was warming to read this. He wrote to Mickey, "Man, I love you, bro. Keep your head up. I remember this like it was yesterday. You will always be my brother for life. I love you and your amazing family. I'm playing basketball this year for your granddad. He was a good man. I loved him and all the stories he used to tell us about being a soldier. I will miss him." That was from Quay Young. He's a name to watch. He's like a basketball star in Jacksonville now. But thank you all. Grandpa loved every single one of you guys and gals. And thanks for enduring my long-windedness. Sorry. I get it honestly. And this is my sister, Marcia.
Good morning. As a tribute to my dad, I had originally planned an interpretive dance. However, Pastor Troy would not let me use the fog machine, and I can't operate under those conditions. So I had to settle with just a few words. Sorry, Dad, but blame Pastor Troy.
Do some flair.
Yeah, I might throw in some jazz hands just to make it right. The bell has rung. Class shall begin. Open your books, grab your paper and pens. Mr. B's class is now in session. I hope you took your hat off at the door, because if you did not, that booming tenor voice is about to roar. The syllabus for today includes a mixed bag of social studies, but will probably devolve into Dad telling war stories about his buddies. John Wayne is hanging on the wall behind him. The Duke is resting his hand on his gun, and next to him is an image of a heart, the proof that Mr. B actually has one. Someone might make the mistake of falling asleep in class. Mr. B might slam a book on their desk with enough force to break glass. Reluctant pupils will learn about history, Sherman's March, Doolittle's Raid, Operation Market Garden, the Transcontinental Railroad, the Treaty of Versailles, Buchanan, Ike, Grant, Goldwater, Reagan. The bell has rung, class is done, papers are shuffled, students exit one by one. The bell has rung, a new class arrives. They learn, they leave. He changes some of their lives. The bell has rung and school is out. Mr. B heads home to his girls. He sings with them both, and he grabs his youngest in his arms and twirls. The bell has rung, and school is out. Mr. B heads to Mickey's game. He sits with Michelle and Annie and cheers, and sometimes the ref catches the blame. The bell has rung, and school is out. Mr. B is in pain no more. But he is still teaching us all lessons in ways like never before.
No, I guess we're good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
We'll now close with a prayer. Our Lord and our Father, we just thank you so much, God. We thank you for this day that we have to come together as friends and as family, Lord, to remember this man that you blessed us with for 72 years. Lord, we're so thankful for his dedication and his love to the idea of education, but most importantly, to the idea of making people's lives better. Lord, we're so thankful for the thousands of people that he touched, for the heart that he shared with so many people, and for the lives that he totally affected. Lord, we ask you to be with his family as he has now gone on to receive his reward. Lord, we ask you to pray for his daughters, give them the strength, give them the hope and the satisfaction in knowing one day, Lord, they too get the chance to see him again and live with you forever and ever. For his grandchildren, Lord, just help them to remember how much they were loved and how much they meant to him and made his life better. Lord, we're just thankful for this life that we have, for the blessings that you allow us to get, and most of all, for the fact that your Son paved the way so that we don't have to live in this world forever, and that one day too, Lord, we have the chance to live with you forever and ever. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. On behalf of the family and on behalf of Lewis Funeral Home, I want to thank all of you for coming and celebrating the life of my Uncle Mike and this great man that we all loved. We will not have an official procession over to the Navy base due to some rules and regulations, and the Navy base has asked, due to space requirements, that we limit it to friends and close family, and we're going to let you determine where you stand. Our close family and close friends. I knew I'd mess something up. If you are going to go to the graveside service, we are going to meet over in front of NAS Pensacola at Olive Baptist Church, the Warrington campus. In the back, there will be some directions if you need them. We need you to meet promptly at 11:30 because we have to begin the processional in at 11:45. We have to arrive when Barankis says we can, or we don't get to go in. So thank you very much for coming. Please sit around and show your family their love. Thank you.
Turn and face the strain. Changes. Don't tell them to grow up out of it. Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. Where's your shame? You've left us up to our next event. Time may change me. You can't twist time. Strange fascination fascinating me. Our changes are taking the pace I'm going through. Changes. Turn and face the strain. Changes. Ooh, look out. You're right.
May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rain fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may he hold you in his hand. May God hold you in the palm of his, hold you in the palm of One more song, let's sing one more song, let the memories linger on and on till we meet